Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. In this update, we've got these classic Ridge Rider setups with the storm track going up and over the ridge. Plus, we'll take a look at the extended range because I will be going out of town for the next 2 weeks. So let's take a look at the overall mid-level jet stream this morning. You can definitely see where the storm track's going to be for today with the sinking air underneath on the southern side of that. That's where the high pressure is. And you've got all those record temperatures are going to be unfolding across Texas today, but that ridge will just expand in the coming days. But for today, that storm track's further to the north, draped across portions of Kansas, and we're going to be seeing some big-time hail producers later on this afternoon with this storm track. And then further to the north, we still have that area of low pressure that brought all the severe storms yesterday, highlighted over the mid-Atlantic regions. We are going to be seeing some marginally induced storms later on this afternoon as well. But further to the south, it's just all about the heat, folks, as the thermometer keeps cranking up, breaking records almost every day in portions of Texas. Now they're going to be sharing that heat for a good part of, say, North Texas. They could be topping out at 108. Really, all that means is as the air starts to dry out, the temp goes up. So they've been feeling it on the heat index front, but the actual temperature is going to be, up there. I mean, this is just going to be expanding over the coming days, and I think it's going to eventually be a multi-state event. You're going to be getting in these 100s as the ridge will start to expand as we get deeper into the week. So for today, you can definitely see on the dew point range, as the air starts to dry out, the temperatures goes up, and that will lift some of this elevated higher dew points further to the north, gravitating towards where that mid-level jet stream is. So we're going to be in the 70s where you see that deep purple is. That's going to be lifting further north this afternoon and bringing the storm track along with it. So even across the portions of the East Coast, you see those dew points well into the 60s, folks. That's plenty of moisture in that atmosphere to start turning the atmosphere over in the heat of the day and produce those strong to severe thunderstorms, even up north for the mid-Atlantic region where they do have that marginal risk in place. But the main concern today is going to be these storm tracks and go up and over the ridge. Well, we do have an elevated enhanced risk, mainly for big time hail producers. We could be looking at some of those 2 to 3 inch type hail variety with these storms, and the wind gusts are going to be cranking as well, some upwards to 65, maybe even can't even roll out a 75 mile per hour wind gust later on this afternoon. But it's really going to be highlighted essentially east of the Rockies here, where the storm tracks are going to be starting to bubble up the atmosphere probably towards the 4 o'clock time frame. Because if we look at the overall radar depiction, by then it looks to have the storm track blowing up east of the Rockies here with these elevated supercell thunderstorms, and these will be traversing across eastbound, sometimes east southeast bound. But these are the ones you're going to have to be concerned about. Definitely some weather watches are going to be in place later on this afternoon, likely between the 4 and 10 o'clock time frame. Those are your main time frames. You got to stay on high alert, and you could be seeing some heavier rains. You saw it yesterday up here. We're going to be compounding to those heavier rains, complements of that low pressure center that's just still sitting and spinning up here across the mid-Atlantic regions. But further to the south, it's just all about the heat, folks, and this has been intense, especially on the heat index front. I mean, yesterday in DFW alone hit 116. That's just one shy of the all-time record on the heat index front. So it's just been extremely muggy. The only difference today is the air dries out a little bit, and that just means the temperature goes up and the heat index goes a little bit further, further down. But what's going to happen is this ridge of high pressure is eventually will be expanding, and that's eventually going to be encompassing Oklahoma, getting into Arkansas as well as into Louisiana, and it's going to be a multi-state ridge as it's going to be expanding, especially as we head towards Friday. So if you look at Thursday, here's the overall setup. I mean, this is your dominating ridge. So anywhere in this orange and yellow shaded area by then, that is your higher heat indexes, higher actual temperatures. There's where the trough is across the Pacific Northwest. They've been seeing some much cooler conditions for a while, really for much of June there, but we do see changes even for them. So this ridge that's going to be pulling in from the northern side of British Columbia, that's eventually likely going to be taking over the West Coast, and you're going to be getting into those higher degree temperatures as we get towards the end of the month and towards the first couple of days of July. But there's Thursday setup, folks. They're going to be sharing those 100s to Oklahoma, back into Arkansas, getting into Missouri. Now you're going to be seeing some of those record high temperatures unfolding across Louisiana. You'll be topping out to near 100 degrees down near in Mississippi. So yeah, more people are going to be starting to feel the heat as this ridge will start to keep expanding, likely intensifying even further as we get into Friday. And of course, on the northern periphery of that, with these ridge riders, that's where the storm track will be. So by the time we head into Thursday, as the warm surge lifts further north, that puts the storm track further north. So your Thursday afternoon setup is really highlighted over the Chicago region, as storms will be starting to bubble up in the heat of the afternoon and traverse down through that east southeast flow through that 4 to say 10 o'clock time frame, would be your main highlighted time frame to be more concerned about some of those stronger storms. So like I mentioned, as we go into the weekend, going into the first day of July, that ridge will start building in from the Pacific Northwest and eventually start taking over California, back into Nevada. Those temperatures are going to be starting to go upward big time. At the same time, further south, the southern ridge will start losing its luster as it starts to wane and elongates. And as it elongates, it's going to allow some of this cooler air aloft to shift further south as well. But there's also these two little storms out in the eastern Pacific that are going to be playing a role and eventually spreading some of the precipitation back into those regions. So if we look at the setup by that July 1st time frame, we've got these areas of low pressure down here in the eastern Pacific, not really affecting any land features as far as a tropical entity, but it will, with the elongation of that ridge, allow, with the southwest flow that's coming in, especially with the ridge going to be draped across the west coast, that's going to be allowing this southwest flow and eventually spread the precipitation back into the southern regions, going forward once we hit, beyond that July 4th time frame. But before that, it's just dry. Underneath that ridge of high pressure, a lot of sinking air. It's going to be next to impossible to rain in that atmosphere. All the rain is going to be on the northern periphery of that ridge of high pressure. So mainly the heavier rains are going to be elongated over Nebraska, getting on the northern side of Kansas, but especially where that low pressure is, taking advantage of some of those higher dew points back into the mid-Atlantic regions and getting into parts of New England, could be seeing some heavier rains. But what's good is the Ohio Valley gets its fair share of this rain, because this area has been bone dry for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So even though I think it's going to be temporary, definitely have some much needed rains in this area for the next 5 days. Because if we take a look at the overall drought monitor index, because of the building El Nino, this area is definitely supposed to keep persisting in the drought. So definitely take advantage while you have the rain showers over your area, because I do feel it's just going to be starting to dry out, after that system moves through. So here's the setup on the temperature front. Once we get into that July 2nd time frame, there's the ridge of high pressure that will be moving in from the Pacific Northwest and really diving in and elevating those temperatures off the West Coast. You've got that cooler air aloft will eventually sneak in a little bit of a cool front further south, especially with the elongation of that ridge of high pressure further south into the southern plains, will eventually allow some of that precipitation down there in the eastern Pacific to get pulled through the Baja of California and eventually go right into portions of Texas in the southern branch. So by the time we head into that July 3rd time frame, you can definitely see that there's the orange shaded area. That's definitely indicative of that very dry air that's moving in, then the dry air heats up quickly, and you are going to be doing that in a big way, for especially for California and the desert Southwest. But underneath that, we got the Southwest flow and all that moisture that's brought to you by from those two Eastern Pacific systems will be starting to spread, especially as the ridge will start to weaken by then. We'll have shower opportunities back into the picture for a good part of Texas by then, and that'll eventually sneak back into Louisiana and filter into our southeastern regions beyond that. So looking at the temperature front going into that July 3rd time frame, you can definitely see there's no 100s anymore. Hardly find anything on the map. Where you do see the hundreds is in the desert Southwest and back into the West Coast. Triple digit heat hits California in a big way and even expands into the Pacific Northwest, even along the coastal regions back into Portland. Those low 90s, folks. So you're going to be start cranking up the thermometer for those regions as you're going to be underneath that ridge of high pressure. But as you do, with all the sinking air out west, that creates, again, east of the Rockies with the Southwest flow, what we've seen for the past, what we saw a lot of in May, the same type setup is at least temporary going to be setting up once we get into that July 4th time frame, with showers and thunderstorms starting to bubble up in the heat of the afternoon to the east of the Rockies here, elongating from the southern periphery to the northern periphery all the way to Canada. As this whole atmosphere further south will start having more opportunities for rain showers, as this whole pattern will start to get more moist, and putting in especially with all the feed that's coming in off the Southwest flow, this will just create daily shower opportunities within this region by the time we head into that 4th, 5th time frame of July. And it just even gets more pronounced as we get maybe into that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time frame, and that Friday, July the 7th time frame, by then. But beyond that, there's the setup on the Climate Prediction Center. We've got the ridge of high pressure. Once we hit the 4th time frame, you got all that sinking air, well below average precipitation front. And again, with the elongation of the ridge waning by then, got the Pacific moisture from the Eastern Pacific. That would put above average precipitation back into a good part of the southern plains. And even then, I think it's temporarily, but it should last at least a couple of days with that setup between, say, the 4th and maybe the 8th time frame. But beyond that, there's definitely signs that the ridge starts to come back off, in not just from the desert Southwest, but will start feeding back, likely by the July the 8th time frame and beyond, would go back into Texas. And so obviously that would crank up the temperatures back again. And then that's exactly what the Climate Prediction Center has for that region. Once you get back into that July 8th time frame through the 10th time frame, as those well above average temperatures still out west with the ridge, but then the ridge of high pressure will be building back into Texas and then likely expand into these regions. And then of course the taps would shut off by then, with hardly any precipitation under that ridge of high pressure. So guys, I enjoyed it. I'm about to get on a plane with my family. We're leaving the country this time, so it's going to be next to impossible to do any updates on videos. But I will be back on July the 12th. I likely will post some pictures of my trip on the community page, so definitely be looking forward to that. But I haven't gone anywhere. I've just posted my out of office sign on there, as I'll be traveling the country making memories with my family. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update where I protect you before and after storm.